Hello and welcome back to WJ Live, powered by The Western Journal. I am George Upper, editor-in-chief of The Western Journal, and I'm joined today by crack reporter Michael Austin, not to be confused with Cracker Jack reporter AJ Shasha. Michael's taller. That's really the only significant difference between the two.
Slightly more handsome.
And that, significantly more.
Significantly.
Than AJ? Yeah. As well as one of the newest members of the Western Journal team, Mr. Jonah Ibarra, who is our assistant video editor, right?
Yes.
Associate video editor, something video. He edits.
It starts with an A.
He edits some video for us. Today on the show, we're going to look at why the left is calling an MMA fighter a hero for beating up women. We'll look at the death of the 1964 Civil Rights Act at the hands of the Biden administration, and the tale of two states, how the governors of New York and Florida have differed in their COVID responses, and what that might mean for 2024. Before we jump into all of that, let me remind you that it is no secret that the Silicon Valley leftists don't want you watching this podcast. They don't want you doing what you're doing right now, watching us or listening to us. And that's why it's so important that you subscribe to us at WJ Live. It's very easy to find. If you're not watching us on YouTube, it's youtube.com/WJ Live. Super simple. Click the subscribe button and then click on the bell next to it. Those are both really important. Look, they're still not going to want you watching us no matter what you do. Okay. But every subscription, here's the part I like. Every time you subscribe to our page, it's like a thumb in their eye. Yeah. It's just very satisfying.
Right. Too bad.
That's just me. But I find that kind of thing very satisfying.
Yeah.
But the cool thing, by clicking that bell as well, don't just click subscribe, click that bell icon as well, because that means you're going to get notified every time a new episode goes up of WJ Live. And so any attempts at shadow banning, however you might define that, whatever that might mean, they get destroyed if you click that bell. You will get notified every time we post an episode up there, so you won't miss a single one. As we continue our fight here at WJ Live and the Western Journal against big tech. And speaking of fighting.
Yes, so an MMA fighter has just been declared the bravest athlete of all time by Sports Blog Nation, which is a subsidiary of Vox News.
Okay. So they're going to be pretty centrist.
So that's, of course.
Yeah, they're going to be right down the middle.
Totally unbiased.
And so bravest athlete of all history, you would think maybe Jesse Owens, maybe Jackie Robinson,
Sure.
somebody from the Civil Rights era.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it's Fallon Fox, the transgender MMA fighter that was famous for breaking the skull of one of his female opponents.
Lovely.
Sorry, getting a little confused with the gender pronouns there.
You're good, in good company because so are they.
Don't misgender.
But yeah, so Sid Ziegler, a blogger at Sports Blog Nation, which is not just some blog; it's a really big sports site. It's a big competitor to like ESPN and all those other sports sites. And she just went on this, or he, I don't. Sid, CYD. I'm not. Might be another transgender person. I'm not sure.
You're just going to get in trouble.
But
either way,
Sid.
Let's go with Sid. We're not going to use any pronouns at all.
Sid declared Fox the bravest athlete of all time in this recent post, and that's pretty troubling. Not just because Fallon Fox is not brave simply for being a man that fights women, but it's even deeper than that. When Fox's first two fights within women's MMA, his opponents did not know that Fallon Fox was a biological male. So they were going into those fights against someone that had serious biological advantages, and they had no idea what they were going up against. So that is certainly not bravery, to have this huge advantage and to use it and to not let anyone know about it and put these women's lives in danger. I mean, clearly they were in danger, because one woman had her skull cracked open.
Right.
So I just wanted to, when we covered this story, right now on our site, it is performing extraordinarily well.
Yeah, it's really resonating with people.
It is resonating with people. People are upset about this. And as I kind of look at the political landscape, looking at centrists, conservatives, and even a lot of liberals, there seems to be this coalition growing of people that do not agree with this whole trans athletes narrative. And it's starting to make me think that we might finally have a really important winning cultural issue on our side. So do you guys think that this is a winning issue for us? Because it seems like I said, there's this coalition building across the political spectrum of people who don't really want to put up with this stuff.
To me?
Go ahead.
No, I would argue that they have pushed way too far.
Yeah.
First it was, Prop 8 with California. First it was gay marriage, and a lot of people said this is just the beginning. A lot of sort of the LGBTQXYZ community, they all tend to group together. So that was just kind of the first step, a lot of people said, and they were called nuts. And then we're now at this point where you are apparently allowed to either lie or lie by omission. That you are a biological male fighting females in MMA?
Yeah, I mean, even if you're not lying, it's completely okay. And, there's so many biological advantages. I forgot to even list. I mean, this should be obvious stuff, but, but some people just need it spelled out for them. So biological men, even
Write this down, folks. Write this down. These are going to be huge revelations.
So the testosterone pumping through their system is probably the biggest thing.
Right.
But even if you take that away, there's increased muscle mass in terms of absolute quantity and percentage of total body mass, denser, stronger bones, ligaments, and tendons, increased cardiovascular reserves due to larger hearts and greater lung volume, a greater height, greater size. They have bigger fists, which is a really big thing in the MMA.
Absolutely.
All those things come together. And another thing that interested me about that, you mentioned how there were people making the slippery slope argument when it came to gay marriage.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought that was crazy. But as it turns out, when you say that gender roles don't matter in marriage, people start to grab that notion and say, oh yeah, gender doesn't really matter at all. Gender differences, there are none.
Yep.
So that does kind of lead to this sort of stuff.
I was in a grad English class 20 years ago, and maybe a little longer than that, about 20 years ago, when I first heard the idea that gender is a societal construct. That was the first time that anybody had ever said that to me. And I remember at the time thinking, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And even in that setting 20 years ago, it wasn't really being floated as a credible mainstream notion. It wasn't really being floated as, 20 years from now, people are going to think this. But here we are, a short couple of decades later, and just look at how acceptance of gay marriage has risen. And that's how the left works. It's very incremental. They really only have to win a fight once. We have to fight it and win it every time to keep something from happening. They only have to win it once. Once they win it, it's happened, and they're on to the next fight. And so conservatives often feel, and rightly so, that on the cultural issues, not necessarily the political or the fiscal issues, but the cultural issues, that it's constantly we're waging war of defense. And you can only do that for so long. You cannot win a war fighting defensive battles all the time, which is, it seems like conservatives are often relegated to that place. That's literally what we try to do at Western Journal and WJ Live is take the battle to the left. And but there just aren't enough people on the right doing that. And it's hard because people on the right have day jobs, right? We we have very few full-time activists. There's a handful of people that you might describe that way. Some pundits, I think of people like Brandon Tatum, who's a friend of the show, or Candace Owens, or some of those folks, Greg Gutfeld, Shapiro. There's a handful of us, but it's tough. It's tough to have a day job, support your wife and kids, your families, whoever, even just yourself, and be an activist full time, unless you got George Soros writing you checks.
Yeah. And I think another interesting thing about the difference between kind of the gay marriage debate and the transgender debate is that the narrative behind gay marriage, that love is love and you can have this affinity towards an individual that's the same sex as you, that's true. You can. I wouldn't say
Sure.
all love is equal, but you can have those feelings, and that's fair. But when it comes to transgender individuals, clearly anyone looking at the situation can see something is going on beneath the surface here. For quite a few transgender individuals, they seem well-adjusted. They just want to switch genders. But on the other hand, a lot of them are homeless. There's clearly serious mental illness issues going on.
And the left will tell you that's because we haven't accepted them. And of course they're mentally ill because they've been unaccepted all their life. And the opposite is actually true. Mentally ill people who are deserving of compassion. And, I don't mean to in any way make fun or be glib about mental illness. But mentally ill people require treatment.
Yeah.
They do not see, this is not a technical definition, but the way I often think of mental illness is it is a disconnect between the way reality is and the way somebody perceives it.
Right.
And there's always some disconnect, right? I don't completely understand reality. I misperceive some things, but there's a line. And at some point you cross that line beyond what's sort of the normal misconception into mental illness. And the left doesn't acknowledge the ultimate reality to begin with. They don't acknowledge absolute truth with capital letters, and so they almost cannot acknowledge the existence of mental illness. They're all just differences of perception. Right?
You live out your truth.
Yeah, exactly.
It is all
That's
about
exactly
subjective
truth. It's all subjective. It's all relative. To your point about love, too, Michael, it's the same, very similar dynamic. We just finished Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, Hallmark has turned into this, ridiculous holiday about feelings. Now, I celebrated I took my wife and I went out to a very nice dinner, and it was a nice day. Nothing against Valentine's Day, but love is not a feeling.
Yeah.
Feelings are important. We shouldn't not acknowledge them. They're, emotions matter. Love is a choice.
Yes.
That somebody is more important to you than you are to yourself. The end. And the left doesn't even like to hear those words. Like, all of a sudden, what about, no, I'm the most important. Self-affirmation, self-esteem. I don't even like the phrase self-esteem, frankly. I just don't like it. And I really hate self-love.
Yeah.
That's not what love is. Love. Jesus said, "Love is no greater love has man than this, that a man would give himself for his friends." That is the decision, not the feeling, because Christ didn't feel like climbing up on that cross.
He prayed to God that he wouldn't have to.
Bingo. That's exactly right. He didn't feel it at all. He decided that he was going to be obedient to his Father. He decided that he loved us more than himself, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And true. And thank God that he did it. But that's a decision that he made. When there's no absolute reality and when emotions rule everything.
And I think we kind of opened the door for that. Like that's such a great point you made, Jonah, about how gay marriage was kind of the door opening for all of this and subjective feelings. And I think what happened was we didn't do a good job of explaining you should love your partner, but marriage is not centered around having this sort of just affinity for your partner. It's so much more than that. It's representing
commitment,
the relationship between Christ and the church. It's giving yourself up for your partner. And in that, it's important that there are two distinct roles within that relationship. And that's an extremely important part of it. It's an important part of raising a family and so forth. And once we gave ground on that, that opened up all sorts of other problems with gender.
Yeah, and I will say this though, kind of back to your original point. They are going to lose. As you pointed out, there's a huge coalition forming of people who are conservative, people who are independent, people who are centrist, blue collar Dems.
Center.
I mean,
left,
even liberals, as you mentioned,
classical liberals really is
classical liberals. They are not standing for this. They do not agree with this. And if this is the hill that
they want to die
that the left really wants to die on, that's fine, because they will be completely overwhelmed by the people who are saying, no, this is not right. You can try and reject reality.
Yeah.
But reality is still reality.
The left seems hell-bent on standing by this position, and then they also seem hell-bent on standing by equity and a lot of the more
Oh my gosh.
racial narratives that are being pushed by kind of the Black Lives Matter crowd.
Yeah, Keisha King actually published an op-ed in the Western Journal this week. I think technically it came out in the wee hours Sunday night, early Monday morning, on that very subject, Michael. And essentially it was her position that Joe Biden has single-handedly put to death the Civil Rights Act of 1964. She started her lead for the op-ed, which, and I just knew I had not heard of Miss King prior to this op-ed coming out. I saw it. I immediately went to Bradley, our op-ed editor. Said, "Where did this come from? This is fantastic." He said, "She just sent it to us." Unsolicited, and I said, I want her email address because I want more of this from her. It was just so good. But she started out the op-ed with, and I hope she's watching this. I may send her a link to it, ask her to watch it. The Biden-Harris administration has decided the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is irrelevant, and we do, in fact, need to discriminate on the basis of race, color, and religion. That was the lead of her op-ed. And it just cut right through all of the garbage coming out of the politically correct left. Joe Biden issued his executive order, and I'll read this to make sure I get it right, executive order on addressing racial equity, not equality, equity, and support for underserved communities through the federal government. Of course, through the federal government, because Joe Biden doesn't know how to do anything apart from the federal government. That should just be appended to the end of every executive order he issues. It just should all say through the federal government.
Right.
That should be his email signature. It should be everything. It should be on his business cards, everything he does. She just made this excellent point that when you get to this point in society where we've kind of come full circle, that in 1964 it was controversial that the idea would be that we would not discriminate using race. We would not even look at race, color, religion in making decisions about employment, about opportunities, etc. Now, despite the fact that historically, and by historically I mean throughout recorded history, which is the closest you can get to saying forever when it comes to man, pretty much, outcomes have always been unequal. That's the rule, not the exception. And the left thinks that just by fiat, that they can just issue an executive order, and now that's not true anymore, which is, again, it's divorced from reality. It is such a warped worldview, that I'm not going to call it mental illness, because I think that's insulting to people who actually struggle with mental illness. But it is, I'm just going to call it stupid. It's willfully ignorant. It is the decision not to accept the evidence presented through my own eyes, my own experience. I am going to decide, I'm going to ignore that and to look at the world and pretend that it works the way I wish it worked.
Yes.
That's literally what this is doing. So I'm going to read you guys a quote from her excellent piece. She says, this concept of equity that is rolled out in the executive order is relatively new, but it's just a way for the Dems to continue their obsession with identity politics and racism. Granting that argument for the moment that that's what, in fact, they are doing, which I would agree with her it is, the question that follows to me is why? Where does that obsession with identity politics and racism come from in the first place, and why is it so persistent?
It comes from history. If you look back throughout the history of the Democrat Party, Michael and I were talking about this before the show, they were the ones who were against desegregation. Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat president, resegregated the federal government.
Right.
Yes.
So throughout history, the Democrat Party has been nothing but a party based purely around the idea of an opinion on race. And so this is just the continuation of that. It's just almost in reverse. So it's racist. What they believe and what they're arguing for is racist.
That's exactly what
but
King
they're
argued,
trying
yeah.
to package it saying it's not racist. And it just takes you opening your eyes and looking at reality to know that what they're advocating for, it's not equality at all. And that's why they're not saying equality. They're saying equity.
Well, one pattern that's always existed through all the different eras of the Democratic Party is that they understand that identity politics centered around race is a great way to get voters to vote for them.
Yep.
And what that has meant over the course of history has changed, but it's still the same idea. Is that if we make it about race, we make it about your identity, your racial identity. That's kind of the most powerful identitarian argument there is right now.
Because you can't change it.
Yes.
Although they'll come up with something. I guess, we are aware of a couple of people in the past few years who have decided they were a race other than the one that they actually were.
Transracial makes just as much sense as transgenderism,
it does.
by the way. But they're opportunists, and they know that they can get votes doing this. And they're going to, whatever this morphs into, they're just going to keep being focused on race.
That's, you bring up an excellent point there, Michael, which it's something I've said on the show before is that if you put somebody in charge of poverty, I think everybody agrees poverty is not a good thing. But if you put somebody in charge of it, they suddenly have a perverse incentive to make sure there's as much of it as possible, right? That makes them more important. It gives them more authority, more power. They can hire more people, get a bigger budget, whatever. So suddenly they have an incentive to either put more people into poverty or expand the definition of poverty so that more people fall into that bucket. Same thing with racism. You paint racism as an evil and you say, I'm against racism. And the more racism there is, the more important I suddenly become. Keisha King actually tweeted about this about a week ago before the publication of this op-ed. I think we have that. We do. Look at that. It's almost as if I told the producers before the show that I wanted that tweet to be on air. She said, it's almost like that. If everything is racist, then nothing is racist. And when you claim everything is racist, it takes away from actual racism. She was obviously, based on the hashtag, she was tweeting about the date. She was tweeting about the Super Bowl and the number of anti-racist statements, anti-racism statements that were made during that. And there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose, except that it tends to continue this lie that the left is so enamored with that America is a racist country founded on racist ideals. And again, if your whole career is based on ending racism, then of course you want race. The bigger a boogeyman racism is, the more of a hero you are for fighting against it. Which leads me to my pragmatic question of the day: is there some sort of practical way for conservatives on the right to win American hearts and minds on this issue? And if so, what does that look like? What does that debate look like from our side?
Well, so I would argue kind of just what I said earlier. We need to remain focused on equality, and we need to define it, and we need to make sure that people understand the difference between equality and equity and what that means. I want to say, I think PragerU has put out a great video on what that exactly means. I know a couple other conservatives, Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, they've talked about this in depth. So there are those videos out there, and I know that we've put out articles too, so go check them out at westernjournal.com. People need to understand that. We need to make sure that we're getting that message out as much as possible. This isn't an issue that we can just put one article out and be like, okay, we did our part, we're done, no more. No, this is something that we are going to have to fight the long haul on, because Democrats have been, again, obsessed with this issue for over 100 years. And we've been fighting them. I mean, the GOP, the conservative movement, we are the party of Lincoln. No, in no way associated with the Lincoln Project. We are the party of Lincoln, literally established to destroy slavery.
Yes.
We have been fighting tooth and nail against leftists and the Democrat Party for over 100 years on this issue, and we need to keep fighting that good fight, because if we don't, we will lose, and we can't lose.
Michael, I feel like you, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you write something a while back when that language shifted, when the Biden administration started talking about equity rather than equality? Didn't you kind of do an explainer piece on that?
I did, yeah.
Okay. So westernjournal.com, go find Michael Austin on our authors page and look that up. You don't remember
Just
the
search
title of
equity.
that, do you?
Just search equity,
Yeah.
and you'll find quite a few from different people, including me, explaining the difference. And
His will be better, though. His is going to be better. So all those other ones, you can just delete those. Don't even, I wouldn't waste my time. Honestly wouldn't waste my time. Just read Michael's.
But I agree with you, Jonah, that it is a messaging issue. And conservatives are at a huge disadvantage with messaging for a few different reasons. First off, if you look at the personality differences between conservatives and liberals, the more creative people are always liberal.
Yep.
Well, not always. Hopefully we're kind of
The
creative.
balance. But the balance.
It's tilted in their favor.
Yes.
And second off, telling...
I wonder if that, I'm sorry to interrupt
No,
you,
you're
Michael,
good.
but I wonder if that's, if there is a correlation there. Because creative people have to be able to look at reality and see something that isn't there
Yes.
in order to create it, right? I wonder if there's a connection between that and the ability to look at reality and deny what is there, right? Which is
Yeah.
what we were just talking about. And so just makes me...
I mean, I'm a writer here. I think I'm pretty creative, and I definitely started out as a liberal. So
So did Ronald
I was
Reagan, though.
tilted in that direction,
Yeah.
perhaps naturally, but I learned better. But the second disadvantage we have with messaging is the fact that liberals get to work when it comes to equity. They get to work with this carefully crafted narrative that is perfectly designed to have all the answers you need. It answers every question you have. And when it comes to conservatives who want to tell the truth, that's not how the truth works. The truth does not
just is what it is.
It is what it is. And it can
That's
be...
such a good point.
More often than not, it is incredibly hard to explain the truth in a way that perfectly encapsulates all the relevant information. So when it comes to equality versus equity, it's so much easier for them to just come out with these clicky little catchphrases.
Yeah.
And it takes people like me, people on the right, it takes explainer pieces online to explain, okay, here's why that's really messed up, though.
Yeah.
And the truth does not conform to any sort of easy way to tell itself. So we're at two huge disadvantages, and it's going to take us a lot more work to share our side than it takes them to just kind of spout out whatever narratives they want to share.
Because they've laid the groundwork.
Yes.
They've laid that groundwork.
They've created their truth, and we have to work with what we have.
Which
And
is the
that's-
actual
that's
truth.
The other part of that is that, the left's narratives, they're always going to be more appealing than ours.
Oh, sure, because they can change them to make them more appealing
Yeah.
whenever they need to.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Which we're actually seeing an attempt for out of New York right now from the somewhat embattled, I think it's fair to call him embattled now, Governor Andrew Cuomo, who is coming under some fire for his COVID response and or lack thereof in some cases, Jonah.
Yeah, rightfully so, George. I've been following this story for a long time. I don't know if you have heard of her, but Janice Dean, she is I believe, meteorologist for Fox News.
Right. Yeah.
She lost, I believe it was her father-in-law to COVID, specifically in a nursing home in New York. And that's kind of the crux of the story.
Yeah.
So, Governor Cuomo, unless you've been living under a rock, is currently embattled, as you said, over the story about them fudging the numbers to the federal government to cover up their non-scientific choice to say, you know what? We have people who are over 65 who are sick with COVID. Let's send them back into the nursing homes that don't have the proper quarantining equipment, don't have the proper space.
The facility for it.
Yeah, they don't have any sort of way to combat that. Let's send them back into that helpless population where they're all over 65.
The most vulnerable.
The most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they, last I heard, it was something like 9,000 deaths were miscalculated, saying that Because the way they got around it was if they got sick with COVID in the nursing home, but they happened to die at the
Outside,
hospital
or at the- yeah.
or on the way to the hospital,
Right.
whatever it was, they counted that as a hospital
Yeah.
death.
It was underreported by, I believe, 50%. So
Yeah.
half
It's a
of
huge number.
Yeah.
Yes. And so just to spit some numbers at you guys, New York, as of 2 days ago, has about 10% in the entire United States
Yeah.
amount of COVID deaths with a little over 45,500. Whereas, and this is to my second point, Florida, which, the Sunshine State, run by Governor Ron DeSantis, a solid conservative governor, they have, I believe it's 25% of their population, of the state population, is over 65 years old.
Yes.
So immediately they are the most vulnerable for COVID. Okay. And they have almost half of the deaths that New York has. Half. Now, obviously, any death is too much.
Sure.
One death is too much. That's clear.
Yeah.
The issue that I have, and that a lot of people on the right and even in the center have, is the coverage between Cuomo and DeSantis. And there's such a
Yeah.
glaringly obvious disconnect between the media and what is actually happening. You have DeSantis, who has refused to close down his state, as well as putting a senior first policy in place to make sure that those most vulnerable can get the vaccine first, compared to Cuomo, where they had some of the most restrictive lockdowns in all the country, even maybe potentially the world. And
Right.
they are still leading the U.S. in amount of death per state from COVID. And the media just made Cuomo this absolute media darling. They gave him an Emmy award
He
for
already has
leadership.
a book out, right? He has
Yeah.
a book about how great he handled all this.
Oh yeah. Right.
How big-headed can you get? I mean, I don't understand it. I do not understand it. So
That you got to admit that takes some guts to willfully lie about your COVID results and then write a book. Not give a speech, write a book that will exist in permanency until the end of time, claiming such great COVID results
Yes.
that are not true.
I would love,
That's some guts. That's
I would,
some guts.
or just arrogance.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I would love to see his book sales as they are right now. So my first question to you guys is this: moving forward, will the media be forced to cover both Cuomo and DeSantis fairly regarding COVID when we have more and more data coming out, scientifically backed data, saying DeSantis, the way that his state is running, is the right way through herd immunity, senior first care, versus Cuomo with lockdowns and a focus on equity
Right.
over equality in regards to the COVID vaccine? Do you think that the media is going to have to switch that narrative?
Well, yes
narrative?
and no. They're not going to be fair to any Republican, but reality is kind of hitting them in the face right now, and they have to be a little more fair in their coverage of Cuomo. Like there's just, and you've seen it. They're starting to be very critical of him, and New York Democrats are turning on him. So,
That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yes and so basically no though. So it's because the standard for holding him accountable is just so much higher. It took this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's correct. I think there are two pieces of it. That's part of it. It's really the fact that other New York Democrats are turning against Cuomo that gives the mainstream media, the establishment media, cover to then turn against him as well. So that's part of it. But there are other dynamics at work here. One of the big ones is we have a savior in the White House now, guys. Everything is okay.
Right.
Because the bad orange man is gone. He's actually gone back to the evil land of Florida. And now we have Joe Biden. And everything is going to be fine. So that actually gives the media some cover to back off any coverage
No.
of COVID at all. It's not going to go away completely because there's still the media knows that they make more money when people are afraid of stuff, and then they can go online and say, yes, and you should be afraid, and here's why. Here's the newest thing to be afraid of, and everybody tunes in to find out why. So it's not going to go away completely, but it does give them a bit of wiggle room to not hit Cuomo as hard as maybe he deserves.
Yeah, and you know what? It's honestly sad. It is. It's frustrating, and it is disheartening because Cuomo's direct choices literally
He killed people.
people.
Andrew Cuomo killed people.
The hashtag Cuomo lied, people died was trending on Twitter the other day. And that's true. That is a factual statement. His office made the decision to send these sick seniors back into their nursing homes, and COVID just flourished. It infected everyone. And not just the seniors, the healthcare workers,
and
the frontline workers.
At the time, it wasn't like we didn't know. Like any of us could have said, yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
But he just did it anyway.
Exactly. So this, though, it might not just have current day repercussions. And this is what I wanted to ask you guys, the last question I wanted to ask you guys. So both Andrew Cuomo and Ron DeSantis have been put forth by the media through different articles or whatever as potential presidential candidates for 2024. Now, obviously, that's 4 years away. Biden just took office. We have a ways to go. However, obviously, COVID is going to be a huge issue, but I'm sure in 2024, or how they handled it. How do you think that is going to affect Cuomo and DeSantis in terms of their party and their chances moving forward to higher aspirations?
Well, Cuomo's done. There's no way.
I think that's right.
Like, it's impossible.
Which I jumped up and down
he
at.
could win. Yeah. DeSantis, I don't think COVID would hurt him. In the first place, I don't know if he's the strongest candidate we could run. Mm-hmm. But, when you think about what he's done, the media has destroyed him left and right over the COVID infection rate. But when you look at, like you mentioned before,
the death rate is what matters.
they're ranked 26th, and it's the oldest state. Like, that's pretty exceptional to be middle of the pack and have the most vulnerable population.
Right.
So he could harp on that, and I don't think COVID would hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think anybody who has a last name other than Harris is going to be in trouble trying to get the Democratic nomination in 2024.
Right.
I think there are plenty of people. I think no, not her. I think Buttigieg would probably be after it. I think, there are a lot of the sort of also ran. Heck, Bernie Sanders may try again. Who knows?
Yeah.
If he's still alive.
And that's all assuming Biden does what he said he was going to do and not run for re-election. And that's not a given. And I think that is probably what will happen, but that's not a given.
Yeah.
But I think, Harris is pretty much a lock for that for the most part. And if you look historically, that's what happens. Vice presidents, incumbent vice presidents almost always run. There are a couple of exceptions to that. One of them being Biden himself, actually, because Hillary had already sort of been crowned the nominee. And the other that I can think of in recent memory was Dick Cheney, who accepted the vice presidency under George W. Bush on the condition that he would not run. He had no interest in running. So other than that, the incumbent vice president runs and generally wins the nomination. So I think if you're not Harris and you want the Democratic nomination in 2024, good luck is all I can say. DeSantis, one thing he would bring to the GOP in 2024 would be Florida, which is the swingiest of all swing states. So I think he'd have a good leg up on some of his competition just because of that. But who knows? I mean, Donald Trump could run again. I would not. I personally doubt that, but I certainly wouldn't put it past him. There are other members of the Trump family who could be looking to get in on that. Mm-hmm. There are certainly Nikki Haley's making moves right now that make it look like she's interested in something like that. And there are other folks as well. So, it's early to to say for sure. And look, if there's anything 2016 and 2020 taught us, is don't say things for sure when it comes to presidential
Seriously.
elections. So
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going to try and do that. But I do think it's fair to say that their COVID responses will be fair game in 2024 for either of these guys if they win, and should be. These are two governors of two big and powerful and prominent states, and their response to any major issue should be fair game for conversation in those
Absolutely.
situations. And I'm going to give myself the last word on that note. Since we are out of time here for WDA Live today, I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to thank you especially for being here. If you are interested, and you should be, in seeing the Western Journal bring you WJ Live every day, you can ensure that. There's another way around the big tech tyrants that you can take advantage of literally right now. Go to westernjournal.com/newsletters, and you see some options there. I think there are 5 for different newsletters that you can sign up for. Frankly, I think you should sign up for all 5 of them, and all 5 will ensure that you get truth in your email inbox every day. But the one I really want to talk about for another 20 seconds here is the one for WJ Live. We will send you every day an email that has a link to that day's episode, so you don't miss any of it. We'll also have some important information in there, updates for you as we continue to try to bring you truth as best we can every day here on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. That's what we're here for, and we are only doing it because of you. We want to equip you with truth as best we can. So go to westernjournal.com/newsletters and sign up for those notifications there. And meanwhile, we look forward to seeing you here back again on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal, every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. Stay safe.
Josh, did you hear? They're putting the Libertarian back on the podcast.
No.
Oh? You didn't see the calendar?
No.
You should talk to Kayla about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, who's on the show Tuesday?
You and Joe.
Yeah. Like he's back.
Yeah, no, you and Joe. You
The
should
Libertarian?
Yeah, Libertarian Joe.
He's not back.
You should just go in the studio and check it out.
You're messing with me.
Okay.
Okay. Nice joke, Kayla. Come here, go to the studio. Oh. No!